Welcome to this deep dive. Our aim today is really to cut through the noise and focus on the critical events shaping the Middle East and indeed the wider world just this past week.
Exactly. We'll lay out the facts, look at the different angles, the perspectives, and what might happen next, all without, the usual bias or hype.
And there's certainly been a convergence of, well, significant military actions and diplomatic shifts.
Very significant. It suggests a real fundamental realignment of power is underway, maybe faster than many expected. We've synthesized reports on some unprecedented strikes, new defense pacts, and crucial diplomatic moves around regional and nuclear stability.
Right. And this deep dive is brought to you by the analytical power of ProWave AI.
And it's generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application designed to bring you timely, multidimensional intelligence, well, instantly.
Okay, let's unpack this straight away. We really have to start with a military action that raises some profound questions about sovereignty in the region.
Yes, the main focus is that Israeli airstrike. Very precise. On September 9th. It targeted Hamas leadership, but it happened in Doha, Qatar.
And the sources confirm casualties, right? Including Hamas figures, but also Qatari security personnel.
That's right. And crucially, this happened while sensitive ceasefire negotiations were actually underway in Qatar, which makes it particularly inflammatory.
And the scale of this, it's not an isolated incident, is it? Our source review confirms this is now the 8th country Israel has targeted militarily since October 2023.
8 countries. It's quite a list. Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Palestine, Egypt, and now Qatar. That geographic scope is, well, unprecedented in recent times.
How does that enormous scope, complicate things for Israel strategically versus tactically?
That's the tension, isn't it? Tactically, it lets them hit perceived threats wherever they are.
Yeah.
But strategically, the cost is immense. International standing, regional relationships.
Especially with Qatar, seen for so long as a stable U.S. ally hosting major American bases.
Exactly. For them, this strike was immediately condemned. A fundamental violation of sovereignty, they called it. And it severely damages their ability to act as a peace broker.
And nationally, Israel's justification is clear. Counterterrorism. Taking out threats regardless of negotiations.
That's their stated position. But connecting this to the bigger picture, it seems to have sparked a really critical shift in thinking among the Gulf Cooperation Council states, the GCC.
A perceptual shift. How so?
Well, following this strike on Allied soil and perhaps seeing a crack in the U.S. security umbrella, these GCC nations, with Saudi Arabia really leading the way, are reportedly starting to see Israel as a more immediate, more destabilizing threat than Iran.
That's a massive strategic reversal. For decades, everything was about containing Iran.
It is a profound change, and it makes you question the current weight of things like the Abraham Accords, doesn't it?
It certainly seems to diminish their political capital, at least for now.
And the GCC isn't just thinking this, they're acting. We saw Saudi Arabia formalize this concern by signing a strategic mutual defense agreement with Pakistan.
Stipulating mutual defense obligations. So this isn't just a temporary disagreement.
No, it looks much more like a genuine strategic recalibration, a deep skepticism about how reliable U.S. defense commitments are in the long run. They're diversifying their options.
Hedging their bets, essentially.
Absolutely. The key takeaway for you, the listener, is that Gulf security is no longer just about Washington's guarantees. Saudi Arabia's actions make that very clear.
Okay, that leads us to another front. The conflict continues to widen, doesn't it? We have to mention the threat from Yemen.
Yes. The Houthi drone attack on Eilat in Israel, it injured at least 20 civilians, a stark reminder of the human cost and the persistent threat from these groups.
So how does Israel handle these threats coming from multiple directions? The diplomatic fallout in Qatar, the kinetic attacks from Yemen?
Well, their response is also widening. Our sources confirmed that on September 26th, the Israeli Air Force hit back hard. Extensive airstrikes on Houthi military and intelligence sites in Sana'a, Yemen.
So a direct extension of their campaign against Iran-backed groups, effectively opening another front near the Red Sea.
Precisely. And at the same time, Iran itself is facing renewed international pressure over its nuclear program.
Right. That 30-day window to prevent UN sanctions snapping back is closing fast. Findings of non-compliance.
Yes, and this is a major test of international resolve. If those sanctions are reimposed, it signals a tougher global stance on proliferation.
And the potential fallout.
Well, economic consequences could be swift. But the big thing for you to watch is the potential impact on global energy markets, especially if Iran responds by, say, further disrupting shipping in the region, That UN deadline is critical.
So with all this volatility, how are the key players positioning themselves? Let's look at the decision makers and their approaches based on our source material, and we'll stick strictly to reporting their stated positions.
Okay, starting with Israel, under Prime Minister Netanyahu, the priority is clearly precise military action to eliminate threats, wherever they might be. They're rejecting Palestinian state recognition and warning of stronger responses to any security challenge. Security first, basically.
Then Qatar.
Yeah.
Understandably, they condemn the strike on their capital. They're emphasizing their mediator role, even though it's damaged, and they're pushing for a fundamental rethink of their security alliances.
They're signaling that U.S. protection isn't a given anymore, demanding accountability.
Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and the wider GCC focus on what they call strategic autonomy, bolstering security through that Pakistan pact, diversifying defense links beyond the U.S.
Yes, looking increasingly towards alternatives like China, perhaps Russia. It reflects a hardening stance against recent Israeli actions they see as, well, destabilizing.
And the United States, the Trump administration.
Trying a very difficult balancing act. Supporting Israel's security, yes, but also publicly regretting the Qatar strike.
Yeah.
Trying to manage the diplomatic fallout, keep Gulf partners on board.
Is that sustainable? Regretting the strike while backing Israel's security posture.
The sources suggest it's getting harder and harder. They seem caught between historical ties and new regional realities. Their influence appears to be waning somewhat.
And Iran.
Iran's leadership denies non-compliance with nuclear obligations under pressure, continues supporting regional proxies, and condemns Israeli and U.S. actions as straightforward aggression. That's their consistent line.
We also need to touch on broader international shifts. Quite separate from the immediate conflict, several Western nations, UK, Canada, Australia, Belgium, announced formal recognition of a Palestinian state.
Right. That reflects a growing international consensus moving in that direction. It puts more pressure diplomatically on Israel and the U.S., who generally oppose recognition outside a final negotiated deal.
And you mentioned earlier the Qatar strike raises questions about NATO's credibility.
It does, and this is where the geopolitical risk gets quite serious. Sources specifically mention the potential risk, however small, of Israel maybe targeting Turkey in some future operation.
And Turkey is a NATO member.
Exactly. That scenario, even if unlikely, could potentially trigger Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause.
For listeners maybe not familiar, Article 5 means an attack on one NATO member is an attack on all. How would an Israeli strike on Turkey test the alliance? Israel isn't in NATO.
It tests everything. Article 5 has only been invoked once before, after 9/11. If Israel conducted a strike seen as offensive against Turkish interests, NATO allies would have to decide if it warrants a collective response.
Pitting the U.S., allied with both, in an impossible position.
Potentially fracturing the alliance over a conflict far outside NATO's usual area. It's a low-probability, high-impact scenario that analysts are now watching much more closely.
So, looking at the reporting itself, how does it reflect this volatility?
Well, the sources we synthesized show this fractured picture clearly. You have detailed timelines from places like ABC News. Then you have deeper analysis, like from South Korea's Hankuk Ilbo, talking about Israel's New Order operations.
And critically, we see some sources taking a tougher line on U.S. and Israeli actions.
Yes, sources like Baidu Baijiaho in China, Omi News in Korea, they're reflecting a critical perspective that's clearly present in major global economies, not just the immediate region.
What about social media? What's the sentiment on platforms like X?
Our analysis shows a deeply polarized landscape mirroring the news sources. Sentiment is overwhelmingly negative, somewhere between 55% and 75%, across hashtags like hashtag Middle East, hashtag military, hashtag attack.
Driven by what, mainly?
Primarily fear and condemnation of the human cost. People are reacting very strongly to the violence and instability.
Let's break down the polarization a bit. What about specific hashtags?
Okay, take hashtag Israel. Around 60% negative posts, we analyze accusations of excessive force, violation of sovereignty, but still about 35% positive, framing actions as necessary self-defense.
And for hashtag Hamas?
Even more negative, around 70%, mostly labeling the group as terrorist, but significantly about 25% of posts frame them positively as a resistance movement. It shows that deep, seemingly unbridgeable divide in perspectives.
And does this divide follow geographic or language lines?
Often, yes. We see pro-Israel narratives more amplified in English posts, often from North America or Western Europe. Pro-Iran or pro-Hamas views tend to be stronger in Arabic or Persian language feeds, where the resistance narrative resonates more.
What drives the negativity overall?
The data points strongly to visual content, images, videos from conflict zones showing casualties, destruction. That's what really amplifies the emotional response and fuels the high negativity across the board. It's a key part of modern information warfare.
Okay. So for listeners tracking this very complex situation, what are the key things to watch for in the near future?
Several critical events are on the horizon. First, at the UN, expect a decision by the end of September on enforcing and monitoring those reimposed sanctions on Iran. That's a big one for global stability and nuclear compliance.
Diplomacy. Is there any hope there?
Efforts continue, however strained. Mediation for an Israel-Hamas ceasefire will likely proceed, heavily influenced by events like the Doha strike and ongoing international pressure.
And within the Arab world?
Watch for moves towards greater unity. Upcoming Arab League summits are scheduled to discuss collective security, aiming for more regional cooperation and autonomy. It's part of that shift away from relying solely on external powers.
And finally, that GCC diversification trend.
Keep tracking that. The implementation of the Saudi-Pakistan Defense Pact increased GCC engagement with China, Russia. Expect that to evolve over the next year. It looks like a fundamental restructuring, not just a short-term reaction.
Right. Well, this deep dive was generated by Stylo News. It uses its OSINT AI engine to pull data from over 250 sources, traditional news, platforms like X, then deduplicates and analyzes it, often delivering these kinds of synthesized insights in under a minute.
We really encourage you to get this intelligence directly. If you value information that's fast, explainable, and draws from diverse global sources without taking sides, you should visit www.stylonews.com. You can subscribe there and get AI-powered news on demand.
Okay, that concludes our deep dive for this week. Thank you for joining us, for making us your guide to understanding these complex global events.
We leave you with maybe one final thought to consider. If that core strategic alignment in the Middle East really has flipped, if the GCC now sees Israel as a bigger immediate threat than they are in the Lino, what other long-standing international relationships might be the next casualty?
Something to ponder. Watch for more Stylo News reports.
And follow us on your favorite social media platforms. Goodbye for now.